You are listening to Talking Images, the official podcast of icmforum.com.
Back, I'm Tom, and today we are going to discuss film addiction. We're all here to present this podcast due to our love for films, wondering if that passion has ever crossed over to the realm of addiction. What does being addicted to films entail for those who are constantly craving their next fix? I will openly admit that I am addicted to watching films. Through this acknowledgement, I am able to manage my obsession to ensure that it doesn't have a negative impact on other aspects of my life. I am joined today by my brilliant co-hosts, Sol, Lauren and Adam, and I have a feeling that they may also consider themselves film addicts or may have been addicted to films in the past.
Hi, it's Sol from Australia. I'm very excited to discuss this topic today. I really like what Tom said about the next fix of screen time because that reminds me of one of my favorite films, Videodrome, which has this center where these people who are homeless can go and watch TV and get their fix of TV and their fix of screen time. So yeah, it's a very Videodrome-ish topic, so right up my alleyway.
I'm Lauren. I don't think I would consider myself a film addict, but I have gone through pretty obsessive film moments in my life, but not for a very long time.
Hi everyone, it's Adam. I wouldn't consider myself addicted to films, but I go through various stages where I watch a lot or other stages where I watch almost nothing. So I kind of go in between two extremes, I would say, normally.
So it seems that we all enjoy watching a lot of films, so I'm excited to find out what extremes or what lengths people have gone to in the past or presently in order to keep up with their fix of films. So the first part I'd like to explore is find out if any of you have ever been in a position where you were watching too many films but couldn't stop.
That's a hilarious first question, Tom, because I think I am currently in that position at the moment where I'm watching a large number of films. The number of films that I've been watching each year has increased every year ever since I've joined the ICM forum. I think I'm currently in that rut at the moment where I sort of want to wean myself off watching films a little bit.
I've watched a lot of films at various points, but never to the point where I haven't been able to stop. I've just been enjoying them so much that I just keep going, but never that I can't say, okay, I gotta stop now, and I can't.
Yeah, I agree with Lauren. I don't think I've ever felt like I can't stop. I've just sometimes felt like watching a lot, and I've watched a lot. But I wouldn't say it's got to the point where I want to stop, but I can't.
It's the same for me as well. Obviously, I love watching films, but there's never been a position where I can't stop. I've just got to get the next one on after finishing another one. There have been times where I've watched a ridiculously large amount of films, one after the other, but it's still not something that's taken over. I've always been able to take a break and do other things and don't let it control my life. So it's never to that extent. Now, I'm wondering if there's been any times when any of you have taken film viewing too far.
I don't know how to answer that one. Taking it too far depends how you define it by too far. I do get an incredible number of films in, but I do have a full-time job and I do have to go to work every day. So it's not like I'm watching films in between classes or as I'm driving to work or driving home from work. That's not happening. So I don't know how you define it as too far. But I guess with some of the multitasking things that I talked about in the Film Purism podcast, like eating while watching a film, well, I know people like Tom would say that's too far. I personally wouldn't say watching or doing exercise while watching a film is taking it too far, or even doing the dishes while watching a film is taking it too far. And I'm sure other people have opinions on that.
I don't think I have taken it too far, although I guess I have to bring up the time when I watched just over 300 movies in a month for a horror challenge. But even though it was a lot of films, I scheduled in breaks. I did 40 minutes of exercise every day. I ate properly. I showered. I got at least 7 hours sleep. So it was a lot of films, but I didn't lose out on anything at any time. So I don't think it really counts as going too far. Also, I had no other commitments or anything that I had to do.
Yeah, I also wouldn't say I've taken it too far, but I'd kind of like Tom to define what too far means, because is watching 300 films in 1 month too far? What's the definition?
It depends on your point of view, doesn't it? Because we all love films and love watching films, but just your average person, they're not going to watch 300 films Was it 300 films in a month? It was, wasn't it? That's a crazy amount of films. See, I think that could potentially be taking it too far. I certainly respect Lauren for doing it and giving it a shot. It's quite a feat, so I don't want to take away from that. So I suppose the definition of too far is comparing us to what average people may watch or consider potentially is less than one film a day. It might be even one film a week or just a couple of films a month. So when you view it from that perspective, you've got to think that perhaps what we are doing in watching so many films could be considered taking it too far.
I do remember Lauren going into rehab after that month, though. Maybe she can talk about that experience.
I just didn't watch horror films for like 6 months.
I don't know. I'm still a bit confused about this whole too far issue. It's not dangerous to be watching this number of films. So I don't know. I just feel a bit more clarity is maybe needed in terms of what too far actually means.
I watched Cinemania yesterday, and like there's one guy who refuses to go to funerals or weddings or visiting a family member in hospital because he needs to watch films. I think that's probably too far, but I think if you don't have any other commitments or important things you have to do, I don't know if it really can be too far.
That's a great point, Lauren. So I suppose we could consider the definition of taking it too far when it has an impact on other aspects of your life. There's one instance where I actually cancelled going to a social event because I got last minute tickets to see a film that I really wanted to see. They were free tickets. So I wouldn't have lost out if I hadn't have gone, but because I wanted to see the film and the opportunity arose, I just made a pretty lame excuse so I could watch the film. And that's perhaps when I took it too far. That was only a one-off though. In case you're wondering, the film that I really wanted to see was Annabelle. So it wasn't a particularly amazing film, but because I had enjoyed films set in the Insidious, Conjuring kind of universe, I was excited to see more of that and I didn't want to pass up the opportunity. It was also a preview screening, so it was an opportunity to watch the film 2 or 3 weeks before general release. I used to attend a lot of those screenings, and that used to be useful for my blog and doing reviews for films prior to them being released.
Going slightly off topic, but in terms of too far, I used to play a PC game called Football Manager. And I remember it got to the stage where like I was kind of disappointed when it was like Friday night, I was at uni and I was going out because I wanted to finish the season on Football Manager. I ended up chucking the game in the bin like a drug addict. But that's not happened to me with films. I would guess going too far is where you're seeing family or friends and you choose to see films instead of it, or you're kind of disappointed that you're going out and doing stuff. I got to that stage like a long time ago at uni at one point because I had so much free time, but it didn't really happen with films for me like that.
Okay, just to clarify, now that we've got a definition of too far, I've not put off weddings or funerals or other social events in order to watch films. Occasionally, I might be disappointed if it's a family function that I'm obliged to attend, which I know is not going to be very exciting, but it's not something which is going to be eating or gnawing away inside of me that I'm not watching a film because I'm here. Maybe a bit of disappointment, but I don't think it's quite the too far extreme that other people have now defined for us.
I'm pleased that we're all such well-rounded characters that none of us have really taken it too far in comparison to the cinephiles that we see in Cinemania, which we'll be discussing a bit later on. The next point I'd like to discuss is why we watch so many films. What's the driving force behind our viewing habits?
Driving force for me at the moment is a gamification, which is a either made up or maybe not made up term, which is used on iCheck Movies and the iCheck Movies forum, where you are constantly watching films because you want to progress in the ranks on iCheck Movies, or because you want to do well in the official challenges, which are held on icmforum.com. So I'd say the main reason why I'm watching so much at the moment is because there's always incentives to watch more films. And even if it's not a challenge that you are going to win, there's all these awards set up where if you watch so many in a month, even if you don't get into the top 5 or so on, you'll still get an imaginary award for it. I know it's imaginary, I know it's not real, but it's just that look of, I guess, seeing your name in bright lights, that sense of achievement to have actually done it. I don't know, it's a personal sense of achievement. I guess maybe it doesn't say very much about my own life at the moment if I'm valuing that achievement so much. But look, it's what makes sense to me at the moment. Before I joined iCheck Movies and the ICM forum, I would be spending ages working out what to watch. Like I'd be going around for 45 minutes up and down my house trying to work out what I'm feeling in the mood to watch. So ICM Forum sort of put the reverse on me. I'm watching more films than ever before because I've got better choices of what to choose. So I've got more reasons to watch things. I've gone from one spectrum to the other. And I prefer knowing what to watch rather than spending ages working out what to watch. But I guess eventually I'm going to have to find that happy medium somewhere in between.
I'm similar to Sol in that the gamification of iCheck Movies is really a big part of making me want to watch more, I guess. I haven't really focused much on list progress and stuff like that for maybe about 5 years now, but in the first few years after joining iCheck Movies, I went from watching maybe 10 films a month to about 3 a day. And it wasn't just that I wanted to progress on the list. It was just that films excited me so much as well. So I like the gamification, but if I didn't like films, then the gamification wouldn't be enough to make me watch as many as I did back then.
For me, I would say it depends on my life circumstances. So when I first got into iCheck Movies and films, I was at uni and I left uni for a while and I kind of had more free time. So I watched a lot of films at that point. And then the last few years, I haven't really watched that many films actually at all. And then in the last few weeks, I've started watching more. I don't know, maybe because of lockdown. So a lot for me depends on how much I have going on in my life. And lockdown has increased the amount I watch. And the gamification aspect, I don't even think I'm in the rankings anymore. It's not something I really care about now. I mean, at the moment, I'm working through the 500 under 400 list. So I do care about the list, but it depends how you define gamification. I'm not working through the list so that I'm ahead of other people. I'm working through the list because I like working through a list, and a lot of the films are good.
So I think there, Adam, you were more interested in the self-satisfaction of watching the films rather than the angle that perhaps Sol was looking at, which is competing with others and trying to watch more films and move up the rankings. So it's an interesting comparison there. I think that my reasons for watching so many films are quite different to everyone else's. So when I was younger, I always wanted to be a writer. That was my dream job, my aspiration. At first, when I was younger, it was just stories. As I got older, it stemmed into reviewing films. I wrote reviews for a number of websites, set up my own blog, etc. So the reason why I watched so many films was to try and help myself become a well-rounded critic. I felt like to push my views and opinions on other people in these reviews, I needed to have seen all of the classics and all of the key films. That was the real driving force for me. When I found iCheck Movies, that really helped this because all the lists were available, so I could see all the films that I needed to see to complete certain lists. The gamification never really took hold for me. I love perusing the lists and using them to help me choose what I need to watch, but I've never really been obsessed with the rankings or anything like that.
I might just throw it out there that I do like watching films to be more rounded, like Tom, and especially with all the different country lists on iCheck Movies, to be able to have, an understanding and appreciation of all facets of cinema. But I guess I just have a very competitive nature, and that sort of has played a little bit into my behavior film watching wise in the 3 to 4 years since joining iCheck Movies and the ICM forum.
I completely understand your competitive nature there, Sol, and I must admit that it is satisfying when you complete a list or you get a new trophy. It's not my main driving force, as I explained, but there is a little glimmer of satisfaction when you make a bit of progress on a list you've been working on for some time.
I might just throw it out there. I actually haven't completed a single list on iCheck Movies. I'm in the top, I think, 175 users, and I haven't got a single platinum award. I'm actually trying to see how high I can go without getting a platinum award. I don't know. It's something which has always struck me as quite interesting because I had no platinums when I joined up to iCheck Movies. I only had 1 gold award. I think I've only got 5 gold awards now. And I'm trying to see if I get really high in the ranks by checking off some of the titles on some of the longer lists, which are only just on 1 or 2 official lists. I'm competitive, I guess, in a way, but I'm also interested to see if I can do it in a slightly different way to other people.
So if you've seen every film on a list apart from one specific one, and it's a film that you really want to see, say it was a new David Cronenberg film that had sneaked into the list, would you watch it, or would you hold back to keep working on your rankings without completing any lists?
That's a very good question. However, based on the lists that are out there at the moment, I have researched them, and all of the lists have got some films in there which are either unattainable for me or which I have no interest in seeing or limited interest in seeing. I don't imagine there'll be a problem. There'll probably more be a problem if a new list got added to iCheck Movies and I was one step away from a platinum on that. Or if a new list got added and it was, I don't know, some random horror list which automatically had a platinum on, then I might give a little bit of a sigh, but I guess it's not going to eat away at me or stop me watching films. It did get to a point where there was a few lists where I was like one step away from getting a gold award because I was trying to keep the golds to a minimum. And in the end, I just thought, it's pointless or whatever. And some of those lists have actually gone above 90% on. I don't think there's a single list at the moment where I'm close to getting a platinum on and which I want to see every single title. But who knows? That might change. And I will address that issue when it becomes an issue.
I love your dedication to iCheck Movies, all on the list. It's great to hear. No, I think that, as we've heard from Lauren, that she's watched 300 films in a month. She is probably going to come out on top of this specific topic, but I'd love to find out what is the most number of films you have seen in one day. And I'd also be interested to find out how you felt at the end of that day, if you can recall.
On Easter Monday last year, I had nothing much to do. There was no work, nothing was open. I thought, okay, look, I'll sit down and I'll have a go at seeing how many films I can fit in. Chris, our usual host, has actually done 11 films in one day, and he posted about it on the iCheck Movies forum, which is what sort of gave me the idea to see how I could go with that. I did 8 films in one day on Easter Monday of last year, or maybe it was the year before. It was one of the Easter Mondays, 2018 or 2019. I got through 8 films. I felt a little bit spacey by the end of the day. I actually took a break in the evening and I went out and did some late night shopping for about half an hour and came back, got a bit of fresh air. It made me feel better. But yeah, otherwise I was fine, though it felt a bit wow afterwards. Anyway, quite recently, actually on another Monday, during the school holiday, so I wasn't working, I managed to try and beat the record and I managed to get in 9 films in one day. I actually didn't feel too bad at the end of that. I mean, again, a little bit spacey, but I made sure that I went outside during the day. I wasn't just watching films continuously. I was also going on the ICM forum and posting about them. So it wasn't just film watching. I think the total number of hours was something like 13, or I think it was just under 13 hours. So it was like 12 hours and 45 minutes or something like that, because I deliberately chose shorter films while I was doing it. And I didn't just sit there doing nothing. I used my treadmill and I got some exercise in. So I think that was one of the days where I got 30,000 steps in because I was doing exercise or watching the films. I was also making my meals and eating because I don't mind doing that while watching a film. So yeah, it was interesting. It was a sense of achievement getting up to 9. I don't think I'll ever be able to crack 9 unless I deliberately go for films which are all 70 minutes or less. That's not what I went for on that recent Monday. I think most of them were between 70 to 90 minutes.
So during the 300 film month, the most films I watched in one day, and I've never watched more since, was 11. I did that, I think, 4 times, and most days it was around 10. The least that I watched in that month was 5. Yeah, mostly it was about 11. The longest day, it was 16 hours worth of films. I can't remember any specific day, but I remember I was pretty energized throughout most of the challenge until it got to about the 20th of October. And then I started to feel really exhausted and it started getting harder. And the more films that I watched, the more drained that I would feel. But up to that point, didn't matter whether I was watching 5 or 11. I felt fine either way.
Yeah, I haven't got to the stages of Lauren and others. I think I've only ever really watched 3 or 4 films in a day. I don't really have the stamina to watch 5 films a day for a month, for example. I kind of get sick of it after a while and I stop concentrating. I think what's quite important when talking about addiction is, someone could hear what Lauren's saying who doesn't watch films. They could hear that and think it's crazy. But I think what's important is what Lauren would have done if she wasn't watching all those films, because I feel like addiction is like an unhealthy thing that takes you away from doing positive things. But if you're watching films like Lauren was in place of not doing that much, maybe it's actually a positive thing in her life. So I think it depends on what she would have done otherwise.
I would have done absolutely nothing.
I know.
And I would have got in a lot less treadmilling if I wasn't watching films on the day when I watched 9 films.
Was watching the films stopping you from finding other hobbies or finding active things to do, for example, Lauren? Or was it kind of obsession with watching like 300 films in a month? Did that kind of become what your life was about instead of perhaps finding other things which might be more positive or beneficial?
Well, at the time, I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't at uni. I didn't have any friends. I lived at home and I just loved films. Films was the thing that I loved the most. And I thought this was a cool challenge while I have nothing else to do. I did actually work a couple times in that month as well. So I wasn't literally doing just nothing, but pretty much just nothing. So this was the most productive use of my time. But now, the other month I watched 3 films in the entire month. So now I'm actually busy. I'm doing my post-grad and I live out of home and I work and I have not really a social life, but I have more stuff going on than I did back then. There's no way I'd be able to watch that many now.
I'm very interested in Adam's line of questioning here about asking whether there's better things, other things that we could have pursued. As someone who hasn't watched as much as Lauren, but who has got through quite a few days where I've done 6 or 7 films in a day, I'm sort of like, what do you expect us to be doing? Should we be searching for cures for cancer or cures for COVID-19 rather than getting through this many films?
Yeah, I'm not trying to criticize anyone. I'm just saying that some people who don't watch many films, they see it as a negative. I think it's important to know that, for some people watching films is a positive thing. And when we're talking about addiction, it has a very negative connotation, like drugs or alcohol. And clearly those kind of things are damaging to you. But, maybe it was a positive thing that Lauren was watching it at that point in her life when she wasn't as busy. So I was just curious as to the reasons behind why she would watch so many films at one point and now not watch that many. Because for me, for example, there was a point where I left uni and I watched a lot of films and I think it kind of filled a void a little bit because I wasn't doing that much for like a few months or a year. Whereas now, over time, as I got busier, I was like working full time, I kind of reduced how much I watched. So I think for me personally, the amount of films I've watched has often been associated with how much is going on in my life. So I was kind of curious if that was the same for other people.
Watching films is a positive experience for all of us, and I respect Lauren for making the most of her time. I think if I had a month where I had no commitments and was able to watch a hell of a lot of films, I probably would do that. I don't know if I'd do it to the extent that Lauren had, but I'd certainly relish that opportunity. Watching films is what I enjoy doing with my free time, and therefore I do tend to prioritise watching films when I get the chance to do so. For the question that I asked about the most number of films in one day, I had watched 7 in one day, and that was actually at a film festival. And at the end of that day, it was a great feeling, to be honest. I was drained, I was tired, because it takes a lot of focus. People might not think that. They might imagine that you're sat in a dark room with the lights off. It doesn't really take much energy, but it does if you really want to focus and get the most out of the film. But it was great. It was just a really fun day. And I think I may have repeated that 2 or 3 times at the festival. There's usually one day each year where they squeeze 7 films in. So that was great. We almost touched upon this in our previous conversation, and I'd just like to find out how everyone feels if you go a long period of time without watching a film.
Well, on average, I would watch 2 to 3 films a day. There'll be some days in which I only get through 1 film. If I go an entire day without watching a film, I do get a little bit antsy, I guess. I think I've had 1 day in the last year where I actually managed to not get a film in because I had too many commitments. I was running around doing other stuff. And at the end of it, I just sort of felt like I didn't really have that me time. I hadn't sat down and watched a film, which is something that I'm just used to doing every day. So I would say, yeah, if I go a whole day without watching a film, I'll sort of get that feeling that I haven't really had the personal time that I'm used to having and used to experiencing watching a film. So for me, one day would be a long time, but I could definitely go a few hours. Okay, I mean, of course, I can go a few hours. Yeah, I'd say 24 hours would be quite long for me.
24 hours, I wouldn't call that a long time, but I like your dedication to the world of films and I'm impressed that you would struggle to go a whole day without watching films. I'm almost similar. I love trying to watch at least one film a day, but there will be times in my life, for instance, if I'm on holiday or staying with friends where that's not always possible. And usually with those instances, I'm having fun, I'm doing other things, so I'm not really focused on the fact that, oh, I could be watching a film now if I wasn't here, because obviously really enjoying what I'm doing.
The on holidays point is interesting because I have been on a few overseas vacations when overseas travel was actually possible without 14-day quarantine periods. So I have gone a whole day without watching films, a few times over the last 20 years. But I'd say the last time where I've probably gone 2 days in a row without watching a film, probably sometime in high school, which, well, I'm 33 now, so I guess that's half a lifetime ago.
Can I just ask then, Sol, when you are on holiday, how would you go about watching films? Would you take your laptop with you so you've got access to them, or what would you do in that instance?
No, it'll just be whatever playing on our local TV. And of course, there's the in-flight movies. And I think I mentioned one of the previous podcasts that I saw The Dark Knight, for instance, as an in-flight movie. But yeah, there'll be other ways. I'll just see what's playing on TV because I won't be spending the whole time out when I'm on vacation. There will be some time when I'm in the hotel room by myself, and I'll just be, I'd have less choice, but whatever's playing on TV, or if they've got in-house movies, whatever's available. I don't think I would have gone more than 2 consecutive days without seeing a film.
When I was younger, I used to think that if I went a day without watching a film, that it was a waste of a day. There were a few years where it would be very rare that I'd go more than 2 or 3 days without watching a film. But over the last couple of years, sometimes I've gone 6 weeks without watching a film. And to talk about like going on holidays, I used to always bring my laptop stocked full of films, basically so that I could average about 2 a day for the entire time that I was away. I would never watch that many, but I always wanted a selection of films. Yeah, in the last couple of years, like I've been at uni, and generally when I've been overloaded with assessments, I don't even think about film. I'm not watching it. I'm just trying to do my assessments and get by. And for me, like film isn't a relaxing thing. So if I'm mentally exhausted, the last thing that I want to do is go watch a film, because that's not a shut my brain off type of activity. So yeah, I think 4 to 6 weeks is the max amount of time I've gone without watching a film. But now I don't think about how long it's been. I just go, oh, I feel like watching a film, so I go watch a film, and that's it now.
I think I'm similar to Lauren. A few years ago, I watched a lot of films, and then I moved to London at the end of 2016. And I think since I moved, especially, I haven't watched that much. When I came home from work, I've been watching more TV. TV to me is more relaxing. So I watch more TV probably now than I used to. Whereas films, I watch depending on my mood. I've gone a few weeks as well without watching a film. And then sometimes I'm just in the mood. I tend to go in like bursts at the moment. Maybe I'll go a few weeks without watching a film, and then I'll go like a week where I watch quite a lot. I've been going to the cinema more in London, before lockdown. So I go to the cinema more than I used to, and I watch more TV than I used to. But I think my overall number of films watched has definitely decreased. In terms of holidays, I don't normally watch films on holidays unless, when I went to Malta, we went to a film festival. That was really great. When I was in Chicago, I saw Before Midnight. It was like the first time it was screening there. And when I went on like a holiday with forum people, we also were watching like bad films together because it was funny. But normally when I go on holiday, I probably won't really watch anything in a normal holiday.
I'm the same as you, Adam, in that I rarely watch films when I'm on holiday. I think the one exception to this was when I was in New York on a family holiday, and there was a day where we all went off to do our own different things, and I decided to visit this film museum over in Brooklyn. and I got there and it was closed for the day. So I was pretty disappointed. Didn't know what to do because my family had all gone their separate ways to do whatever they wanted to do. So I headed to the nearest cinema and I got to watch The Hurt Locker because it wasn't out in the UK yet. So it's kind of exciting to see that maybe a month or so ahead of my friends in the UK. But other than that, when I'm on holiday, it's a time to kind of relax and unwind and take a break from my normal day-to-day life. I like what Lauren said about it being a waste of a day if you don't watch a film. I know that's not something that is current in Lauren's situation, but it's the same for me. I don't currently feel that it's a waste of a day, but in the past I have felt that not watching a film has been a waste of a day. And I think when you have thoughts like that, that does kind of get over into film addiction. Like, you really want to watch film a day, and if you don't, you feel kind of let down in some way. And that kind of links in nicely with our next point, which is whether watching so many films can be considered unhealthy in any way.
I don't know if watching too many films can be unhealthy. It probably depends on what else you are doing. If you're a film purist, it might be, because then you're sitting in front of the screen the whole time. You're not leaving for any reason. You don't have your phone with you at all. So in that situation, then yes. If you are doing other things, like you're eating, you're preparing light things while a movie is on, I don't know if it can be unhealthy.
I think, like what we said earlier, I mean, too much of anything is unhealthy, but I think it's only really a problem if it's taking away from other parts of your life. I think if that's what you enjoy doing and that's what is bringing you joy, or that's what you want to fill your day with, then I don't think too much of it is a bad thing. But I mean, it's easy to get burnt out when you're watching a lot, and it can sometimes put you off watching for a little while, sometimes 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah, I think it's only too much or unhealthy if you're actually negatively affected. I mean, if you're enjoying it and that's what you want to do, I don't think that's a bad thing.
I don't think it's unhealthy to watch a lot. I think it depends on you and your life in general. I think a lot of the top people on ICM, they've kind of watched nonstop for a long period and then kind of burnt out and not watched that many for a while. I would guess that a lot of people watch a lot of films depending on like their life. And then at some point, maybe they get married, maybe they suddenly have more commitments and the hobby kind of reduces into something which is much more normal. I do think there will be some people in the world though for whom it is unhealthy and it becomes the only thing they do. But I don't think it's people on the forum generally.
I think watching too many Turkish comedies can be very unhealthy.
Well, actually, I think that's an interesting point because in terms of like, I don't know if it's addiction, but years ago we were working on the IMDb top 50s. And there was a point where Lauren and I were watching these films that we hated just to complete the list. One thing that's changed for me is a few years ago, just because I wanted to complete a list, I would sit through 2 hours of a film that I absolutely hated and it caused like pain to me. But nowadays, I think if I was watching that kind of film, I probably would just quit because I wouldn't think it's worth kind of what's the point of me wasting 2 hours watching a film I hate. Whereas, yeah, a few years ago, I just sat through it anyway. So I think it's not that healthy to watch films that you absolutely hate that cause you pain. and I think in that respect, that could be unhealthy. And that's something that's changed for me.
Unfortunately, I hate or greatly dislike most films I watch, so I'm usually in a lot of pain.
I know you've said that before, Lauren, but I actually think that's an interesting trait because you've said before that you're never sure when you sit down to watch a film whether you'd like it or not, which is a bit different to me because I pretty much know what sort of films I'm going to dig. So I'm not very often surprised by my reaction to a film, and I think I would appreciate it if I had a taste where I was able to be surprised more often about what appealed to me and what didn't appeal to me.
I generally have an idea of what I might like. It's just that I'm mostly surprised. There's films that I see that I'm pretty sure I'm going to hate, then it's pretty good. Films that I think there's no way I'm not going to love this, and I want to stab myself in the face. So I just watch everything and hope for the best, and usually get the worst.
Having said that, I feel like you don't hate as much now as you did a few years ago, or maybe that's just because you watch less. I'm not sure. That's my impression, though.
It's probably because I watch less, but I don't really hate that many films. It's just I don't like many films. I rate most things a 4 or a 5, which is just, bad or meh. But hate is actually quite rare. Not as rare as me loving a film, but I don't hate as much as it sounds like I do.
I really like Adam's point about it being unhealthy watching films that you don't enjoy, because I'm quite similar to Lauren in that I will watch films that I know I'm probably not going to enjoy just because it's a film in a list that I'm currently working on. One thing that I'm surprised no one mentioned here, because I thought this would be brought up, is the notion of couch potatoes. Because there's lots of people who you imagine just don't move from their couch and are just sat in front of the screen all day. I know that's not the case with any of us because, we're people who exercise and take care of ourselves. But I think watching films can become unhealthy if you're someone that does nothing but that. Your main focus is just you're sat on the sofa watching films all day in, day out, not really leaving the house, and in all other aspects of your life in favour of film watching. And I'm happy that none of us have gone to that extent in our film viewing habits.
The only way you can become a couch potato would be if you are a film purist, because you're sitting there dedicated, just sitting there watching it. I think if you're not a film purist and you don't mind doing other stuff while film's on, things where you can still pay attention to what's going on, but you're eating a meal, you might be preparing a meal, you might be doing some exercise. I think as long as you're not a film purist, I think it's really hard to actually really become that couch potato scenario that people imagine when you tell them, oh, I watched 9 films on this day.
I'm pretty much a potato. I do work out more now, but definitely when I was younger, I was obese for like 20 years. I did not move.
I would have to disagree with your point there, Saul, because I'm a film purist, but I'm not a couch potato. I exercise regularly, I eat healthily, and I leave the house to meet up with my friends and do things as well as watching films.
Hey, sorry, Tom, I wasn't calling you a couch potato. I guess the point I was making is that if you watched 7 films a day, not at a film festival, but at home 7 a day, you'll just be sitting there on the couch doing nothing. Whereas when I watch 7 films a day during the holidays, I'm doing exercise and other stuff also. I'm not just sitting there idly the whole time. No offense, guys. I don't mean to call anybody couch potatoes, so I apologize if there's anybody listening who is a couch potato. I'm not having got you either. It's a lifestyle choice, and I don't maybe support it, but I condone it.
So I think from what we've discussed so far, it's pretty clear that a lot of us share similar traits in how we watch films, and we are all addicted to some extent, or have been in the past. And I'm curious if this part of your personality has extended to other areas of your life, or whether it's something that's just remained focused on films.
I have an extremely addictive personality. At this stage, it is totally centered on films, and I think that's good because films help me to learn things. I learn about the world, I learn about history, I learn about famous authors. So there's so much you can actually learn just by watching films from all around the world and from all decades. The way technology has evolved and everything, it really enriches you. When I was younger, so this is like going back to probably before high school or maybe early high school years, there were some computer games, like one was called Theme Hospital, where I'd just sit there for hours and just play it and play it and play it. And my parents would tell me, you've got an addictive personality, Soul. And I'm like, okay. So when I was growing up, before I really got into films, I'd say when I was, 11 or 12 years old, I was really interested in music. I was really interested in movies. And at one point, I really honed in on the music. And then the movie sort of took over and it sort of hasn't gone back since then. So I don't know if there's anything else that I'm really addicted to at the moment. I do know that I've got an addictive personality. So there's some things that I don't get into because I know with my sort of personality that I might not be able to stop doing it, as you can tell with film watching at the moment. And podcasting at the moment. That's also very addictive.
Yeah, I have a pretty addictive personality as well. Probably more centered around just spreadsheets in general. The film is definitely my biggest passion, so it mostly focuses around that. I'm pretty into books at the moment. I'm reading a lot. I watch a lot of albums and work on a lot of album lists. If it's on a list, if there's a list of something, then I want to work through the list. But the thing is, if I'm not interested in something, then I won't do it. So I either love it and want to do all of it, or I have no interest in going anywhere near it at all. And I get addicted to video games occasionally, but not as much as I used to. But yeah, these days I'm not really addicted to anything. But there are some days where I just want to make a spreadsheet, and I'll just spend like all day making a spreadsheet. So that's probably my only addiction now.
I guess I have a bit of an addictive personality as well. I don't know if it's like this for anyone else, but I'm very much an all or nothing kind of person. So sometimes it's kind of annoying when I listen to bands, for example. If I really like a band, then my favorite band, suddenly I've got to listen to like everything they've ever released. And I have like a big spreadsheet of like all their songs. I find it hard to like a band, for example, and just listen to a few songs and kind of forget about them. Instead, I kind of have to listen to everything they've done. And as I mentioned earlier, the only thing I was truly addicted to was a Football Manager game, which got to the extent that I chucked it in the bin and never played it again 7 or 8 years ago, and I haven't played it since. But I don't play video games at all anymore. But yeah, my issue is more like what Lauren said, that I'm kind of obsessed with spreadsheets and lists. If I go on holiday, I make a big list of like attractions to go to and everything. So my issue would be when I really like something or really interested in something, I kind of get a little bit obsessed with having to like explore it fully. But I don't know if it's a problem necessarily. My addiction does not carry over into alcohol or drugs or anything. I've never done drugs. I don't drink that much. So it's not a particularly unhealthy addiction, I would say, compared to what some people have.
For me, there always seems to be an all-consuming passion in my life. When I was growing up, it was video games. Like Sol said, I used to play Theme Hospital and games like that, management games. Never got into Football Manager because I wasn't really a football fan, but I can certainly relate to Adam and getting into that and how it took over as well. I always wanted to complete the games, explore everything they had to offer. I really enjoyed doing that, and it would take over. And then I think as I grew up, got more into music. It was never an addiction as such, but I'd love going to watch live bands, collecting loads of CDs. I used to DJ on nights out as well, so I enjoyed that. And then it kind of dove it into an obsession with films that I think became this addiction that it is now, where I just love watching as many films as possible and I have a lot of fun doing it.
Just to add one thing, that Football Manager game is kind of like the ICM Forum ideal game. You make lists of players, you're offering contracts, it's all about stats and everything. So even if you're not interested in football, I think there's a common trait in terms of the types of games we like, the types of things we get obsessed with. I think you can see common traits in all of us, even if we have slightly different interests from each other.
I agree there, Adam. You've kind of reminded me of something that I can confess to here, because I actually owned a games console for years, and the reason being is that I know I get addicted to games, so I purposefully avoid having consoles, that I don't waste hours of my life playing games. Problem arose a few years back because now you can get games that are just as good on your mobile phone, and there is a game that I became massively addicted to the detriment of my film watching habits. I still watch films, but I'd always rather have been playing the game. But I realised that game was taking over my life. You might find this amusing, but because I knew it was becoming a problem, I got my girlfriend to put a parental lock on the game so that I can only play it for 7 hours a week, an hour a day, and that's worked. So I still play it and I enjoy it, but when that came into place, that parental lock, it meant that my enjoyment of films increased because I had more time to watch films rather than playing this stupid game. And the game, if you want to know, if you're interested, it's Hearthstone, which is a fantasy card game spin-off from World of Warcraft, and it's about as exciting as it sounds.
Yeah, funny thing is, I also don't have a console, and I haven't had one for more than 10 years, I think for the same reasons as you, Tom. But I don't know what it is, but other games I could kind of play okay, but that Football Manager game, honestly, it was like an obsession, the one thing that took over me. I think I would avoid consoles and PC games for the rest of my life, probably. In fact, I actually bought Football Manager a couple of days ago on Steam, and then 20 minutes later, I applied for a refund, so I didn't end up playing it. So I was about to play it, and I was like, no, I can't get back into this again. So I managed to avoid that trap. Although I think if I played it now, I don't think it would take over in the same way, but some things are best avoided completely.
Yeah, I have to cancel my old school RuneScape subscription every time semester starts, because if I have a subscription, I won't do my homework. So I've had it over the last 2 months, but I actually have to cancel it now for next week so that I can actually finish the semester.
This is actually all very interesting because I haven't had a game console myself since I moved out of home. So I think I've been living on my own for 9 years now. And yeah, I didn't bring a console with me, never bought one. I haven't really played any games on the internet except for, I did get into Tetris a little bit for a stretch. I was actually really interested in doing retro Tetris for, I don't know, a few days. I don't know why. But otherwise, generally chess on chess.com. It can sometimes get a little bit addictive. You sort of like lose the game, you want to try and play another game. Otherwise, never really been into games. I mean, I did when I was growing up, but I guess pretty much since high school, the movies have taken over.
It's really interesting that we've all got similarities with this and kind of addictive personalities. It makes me wonder, if films didn't exist, would we be addicted to something else in their place? And I think we probably would. We'd find something else to kind of fill that void or fill that gap. Bringing it back to the world of cinema, I thought it'd be nice to just take a look at how film addiction has been depicted in films and perhaps compare our own viewpoints on whether we're addicted to films with the portrayal of similar characters in films.
Okay, I'm not sure how to respond to this question, Tom. I don't know if I've seen a film character that I can really relate to in terms of my addiction to watching films. I mean, there's been some pretty great films made about obsessive filmmakers and people who can't stop filming. I don't know if there's really much that's been made about people who can't stop watching. Beyond Videodrome, which is all about a metaphor for how immersed we get in watching a film with putting your head in the television set, and all these people are addicted to the cathode ray, and they need to go and get cathode ray support at the center. But yeah, I don't think there's really any film characters I can think of that really match me film watching wise.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen any either. I watched Cinemania yesterday after putting it off for like 15 years. I was expecting to have more in common with them, but they felt really just foreign to me. I mean, parts of things that they thought about life and film I agree with, but just not much of it. I thought like they were too extreme, I guess, like we were talking about earlier. And to me, like all the stuff that they were talking about was what would suck the fun out of film for me. So yeah, I didn't really identify with them, and I don't think I've ever seen a fictional character that I related to in that way.
Yeah, same answer as Lauren for me, really. I don't think I can relate to them at all.
It seems like it's an underrepresented area of cinema, that there's perhaps not enough films about people who are addicted to films. I watched one quite recently called Video Man, which is an excellent Swedish film, kind of like a throwback to 80s films about a video store owner who's obsessed with horror and giallo films. I really enjoyed watching that, and my girlfriend saw a lot of the character traits of myself in the main protagonist, and that was quite a good film. Lauren mentioned Cinemania, which is an excellent documentary. I agree that the people that we see in Cinemania, they take film addiction to the extreme. Because they delve into the past of these characters, a lot of it relates to their viewings of films before the internet was around. And it's fascinating to learn about how they jumped from cinema to cinema across New York, trying to fit in as many films as they could, making sure they didn't miss key films. And that adds a whole new dimension to the world of being addicted to films. It's not something that we really have to contend with anymore because films are so readily available. And it is a fascinating documentary.
One thing that I found really strange with that documentary was how they had some sort of, mental problem. Like one guy, I think, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I'm pretty sure some of them had some form of autism and anxiety. And one guy was even taking anxiety pills, but they were so keen to just be out and watching films. Whereas I'm determined to not leave the house. I don't think I could feed a cinema addiction because I wouldn't want to leave the house ever.
It was certainly an extreme representation of what film addiction can be, and I suppose it's relieving in a way to think that I've never took my film viewing to such extremes. I'm happy to say that I am addicted to films, but I know when to stop to make sure that I enjoy all other aspects of my life and that it doesn't take over.
Something I just thought I would say, because I've been racking my brains over the last few minutes and I can't think of any narrative films which center on characters who are addicted to watching. I guess it's just not a very cinematic subject to have a narrative film about a person who's just sitting there watching all the time, unless you introduce, I guess, some sort of horror or fantasy element where they start to have delusions or something. I don't know. I guess it's just not something which can be a really enticing subject for a narrative film. I wish I could say there were more film characters who I could relate to in viewing habits, but I can't really think of any offhand.
I don't think I'm addicted to films. I'm not sure I ever was addicted to films. I think just my personality means I love lists, when I like something, I like it a lot. I get really into it. So it could be films, music, anything. But I don't think it's really addiction. I think it's just, I find it difficult to just be interested in something a little bit. I prefer to kind of get completely into it and explore everything, different genres, different years, different countries, that kind of thing. So I check movies, that appeals to me because you're keeping a track of what you've watched. But I don't think it's an addiction at all. I think it's just that my personality means I tend to get more interested in something. And I find it difficult to relax unless I'm kind of focused on a passion or something. I'm not someone that easily sits down and does nothing. So films are kind of a reflection of my personality in general. And lists, I just love lists as well.
I'm pretty much the same as Adam. I don't think that I have an addiction to film, but I either love something or I have no interest in it whatsoever. So with film, which is the thing that I love the most, then that is going to seem maybe obsessive or overly passionate, but I'd rather be really passionate and obsessive about one thing than just kind of middling around with a bunch of things and not really getting that involved with any of them.
Contrary to Adam and Lauren, I'd say that I do have a film addiction, but I'd say it's probably in the most part a healthy addiction. When I think about all of the other things that I could be addicted to, things that would have me sitting staring at a computer screen, or things that would have me doing socially undesirable things, maybe. There are worse things that I could be addicted to, and I guess it's a healthy addiction the way that it teaches me a lot about the world, especially because I'm not just addicted to watching one sort of film, I'm addicted to these film challenges and these lists on iCheck Movies. So as I said before, I'm learning all about the world. I learn about geography because I research places after watching a film, but before watching a film, I've been watching them from a certain region. I learn about changes in technology over time, historical figures, important writers, music of certain times. There's lots you could learn culturally about the world, sitting down and experiencing all different types of films. So I guess it's my way of learning about the world because I'm interested in the world and I'm interested in, I guess, seeing it through the filter of the cinema screen. In terms of the addiction, I could probably be watching less films, and I suppose if I had more going on in my life, maybe I would be watching less films, but I don't. I'm not in a relationship at the moment. I've got no pets or children of my own to take care of. I've just got a job and I've got something that keeps me interested on the side. And at the moment, that's what makes sense in my life. So I don't know, that's where I am. It's an addiction. It's not a crippling addiction. It's an addiction that I know I have. And I guess knowing and recognizing that it's an addiction is an important step because it will come to the point eventually where I'll need to change my habits. And if I know that I'm addicted, well, that's half the battle. I might also mention that watching films from different countries also gives me a very good grasp of foreign languages. I've learned a lot of Spanish and French beyond what I would have known otherwise, just from movie titles, from hearing certain phrases repeated in films. So I'm learning a lot culturally by watching different films also.
I think it's great that you can take away the positive aspects from being addicted to or being obsessive over films because, like Sol says, it's a great way to learn about new cultures, about the world. And I too will sometimes find myself when I'm watching a subtitled film that I'm not particularly interested in. I will listen to the words and look at the subtitles and just try and get a grasp on the language and try and learn a bit more about the language. So there's opportunities to take the obsession and make it a positive aspect of your life, which is brilliant. So thank you for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about film addiction, and we would love to hear if you are addicted to films or have any stories about where you've taken film watching to an extreme. If you do, then please share with us on icmforum.com, and we hope that you will join us again next week.
Hi, Chris here, ending the podcast on a far more somber note. It's also important to note that if you think you actually do struggle with film addiction, you should consider seeking help. Signs that may have gone too far include, as Tom, Saul, Lauren, and Adam already discussed, the inability to stop and decrease socialization, like abandoning commitments or ignoring relationships. But it's also the sign of actual withdrawal symptoms. If you're not watching films and you feel that you start to get edgy, or perhaps you're losing concentration, you get bursts of anger, etc. It's quite possible that you do have an actual issue. I'm very happy to hear that my co-hosts are able to stop and have not experienced these symptoms, at least not recently, which would probably mean that they also wouldn't be categorized as addicted by professionals. Though, of course, the line between obsession and addiction can be thin. If you need to talk, know that you can always reach out to us at icmforum.com. We have a great supportive community, including many that have gone through more severe viewing habits than those discussed, and we are always open to listen. But if you do feel that you don't have control, have isolated yourself away, and get genuine withdrawal symptoms when you stop, you should seek help from a licensed professional. So, on that extremely melancholic note, thank you again for listening, and I hope you join us again soon for a far more uplifting episode. Hopefully. You have been listening to Talking Images, the official podcast of icmforum.com.